Wife lied to parents. Marriage betrayal story. Family truth revealed. Wife's secrets exposed. Marriage trust broken. Parents know truth. Relationship deception. Emotional marriage story. Husband-wife conflict. Family betrayal story. Real-life story. Marriage drama. Family drama. Relationship. Advice. Emotional storytelling. Life lessons. Trust issues. Story time. Video. Personal growth. Communication in marriage. The word Renaissance comes from the French language and means rebirth. Historians use this term to describe a period of remarkable change that swept across Europe, beginning in Italy during the 14th century and spreading northward over the following 300 years. It was a time when people looked back to the ancient civilizations of Greece and Rome and sought to revive their learning, their art, and their ways of thinking. After centuries of what some scholars have called the Dark Ages, Europe was waking up. The changes were extraordinary. In Florence, artists like Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo created works of such mastery that they redefined what human beings could achieve with paint and stone. In astronomy, Copernicus and Galileo challenged ancient beliefs about the heavens, suggesting that the earth moved around the sun rather than the other way around. In literature, writers like Dante Petrarch and Shakespeare gave voice to human emotions and experiences in ways that still resonate today. The printing press, invented by Johannes Gutenberg in the mid-15th century, allowed ideas to spread faster than ever before. Universities flourished. Cities grew wealthy through trade. A new class of merchants and bankers rose to power alongside the old nobility. At the heart of this transformation was a philosophy called humanism. The humanists believed in the dignity and potential of individual human beings. They valued education, curiosity, and the pursuit of knowledge for its own sake. They studied ancient texts, not merely for religious purposes, but to understand history, philosophy, and the natural world. This emphasis on human reason and achievement gave the Renaissance its distinctive character, a confidence that people could understand the world, shape their own destinies, and create beauty that would last forever. Yet for all its brilliance, the Renaissance was not simply an age of light. Shadows gathered in the corners of even the most magnificent palaces. Political power was unstable, and those who held it often maintained their positions through violence, deception, and ruthless calculation. In Italy, city-states like Florence, Venice, and Milan competed constantly, forming alliances break-intem, and sometimes resorting to assassination to remove rivals. The powerful Borgia family became notorious for their willingness to poison enemies. The Medici of Florence, great patrons of the arts, were also skilled manipulators who survived multiple conspiracies against them. In England, the struggle for the throne produced decades of civil war between the houses of York and Lancaster. Kings were overthrown. Rivals were imprisoned and killed. Even children of royal blood were not safe. Across Europe, religious tensions added another layer of danger. The Protestant Reformation divided Christianity, leading to persecution, warfare, and the burning of those deemed heretics. The Inquisition sought out suspected enemies of the faith. Spies operated in the courts of every major kingdom, watching, reporting, and sometimes eliminating those who posed a threat. This combination of brilliance and brutality, of openness and secrecy, created the conditions for enduring mysteries. The Renaissance produced people of extraordinary talent whose lives were cut short, or whose stories were deliberately obscured. It produced documents that were hidden, destroyed, or encoded beyond understanding. It produced events that powerful people had every reason to cover up. And because record-keeping was inconsistent, and because so many of those who knew the truth had reasons to stay silent, many of these mysteries have never been solved. The passage of time has made things both better and worse. On one hand, scholars have discovered documents that were lost for centuries. New technologies like carbon dating, infrared imaging, and DNA analysis have opened possibilities that earlier generations could never have imagined. On the other hand, time erases as much as it preserves. Witnesses died without telling what they knew. Documents crumbled into dust. Memories faded. What remains is often fragmentary. A letter here, an account book there, a painting that raises more questions than it answers. There is also the matter of deliberate concealment. The Renaissance was an era when secrets had power. Rulers hid their crimes. Spies protected their sources. Scholars encoded their most dangerous ideas to avoid persecution. Some of what we do not know was never meant to be known. The people who held the answers took them to their graves, and in many cases, those graves have themselves been lost. And yet, the mysteries endure. They endure because human beings are drawn to unanswered questions. We want to know what happened. We want to understand why. We look at a painting and wonder what the artist meant. We read about a disappearance and imagine what might have occurred. We encounter a coded text and feel the pull of the puzzle, the desire to be the one who finally cracks it. These mysteries have survived for centuries, not despite their uncertainty, but because of it. They invite us to engage, to speculate, to search for answers that may or may not exist. The 4 mysteries we will explore in this journey are among the most famous and most studied from the Renaissance era. Each one has fascinated scholars, inspired theories, and resisted definitive resolution. Each one opens a window onto a different aspect of Renaissance life. Its art, its politics, its literature, and its pursuit of hidden knowledge. And each one continues to echo through time, as fresh and puzzling today as it was 500 years ago. The first mystery involves perhaps the most famous painting in the world. Leonardo da Vinci's Mona Lisa hangs in the Louvre Museum in Paris, where millions of visitors pause before it each year. They stare at the woman in the portrait and find themselves asking the same questions that have been asked for centuries. Who is she? What is the meaning of that famous smile? Did Leonardo hide messages in his masterpiece? And if so, what was he trying to say? Despite countless books, articles, and scientific studies, the answers remain elusive. The second mystery takes us to England in the year 1483. King Edward IV had just died, leaving his 12-year-old son to inherit the throne. The young prince and his younger brother were lodged in the Tower of London, ostensibly to await the coronation. But the coronation never happened. The boy's uncle seized the throne instead, becoming Richard III, and the 2 princes simply vanished. They were never seen again, and their fate has been debated ever since. Were they murdered? If so, by whom? And if not, what became of them? The third mystery centers on a playwright whose talent rivaled Shakespeare's own. Christopher Marlowe wrote some of the most powerful plays of the Elizabethan era. He was also, by most accounts, a spy, an agent working for Queen Elizabeth's Secret Service. In May 1593, Marlowe was killed in a tavern in Deptford, supposedly in a fight over the bill. But the circumstances were suspicious. The witnesses were all connected to the world of espionage, and questions about what really happened have never been satisfactorily answered. The fourth and final mystery involves no famous figure at all, but rather a book. The Voynich Manuscript is a handwritten volume of approximately 240 pages, filled with texts in an unknown alphabet and illustrated with strange drawings of plants, stars, and human figures. Carbon dating places its creation in the early 15th century. Since its rediscovery in 1912, scholars and codebreakers have tried to decipher it. None have succeeded. The manuscript remains one of the most puzzling documents in existence. What connects these 4 mysteries is not just their age or their fame. It is their incompleteness. In each case, crucial pieces of the puzzle are missing. Documents that might have explained the truth were lost, destroyed, or perhaps never created. Witnesses died without revealing what they knew. The passage of 5 centuries has erased much of the context that might have helped later generations understand. What remains is a mixture of fact and speculation, of evidence and interpretation, of questions that multiply the more closely we examine them. And yet, this incompleteness is also what keeps the mysteries alive. A solved mystery becomes a settled fact, noted and then largely forgotten. An unsolved mystery invites return, reconsideration, fresh attempts. The Renaissance continues to speak to us through these whispers, precisely because we have not yet deciphered everything it has to say. Let us begin with perhaps the most famous face in the history of art. A woman whose identity remains uncertain and whose smile has sparked endless debate across 5 centuries. Leonardo da Vinci was born in 1452 in the small Tuscan town of Vinci, from which he took his name. He was the illegitimate son of a notary and a peasant woman, but his extraordinary talents soon became apparent. As a young man, he trained in the workshop of the renowned artist Andrea del Verrocchio in Florence. There, Leonardo learned not only painting but also sculpture, metalwork, and the technical skills that would serve him throughout his life. By his 30s, he had established himself as one of the most gifted artists in Italy, a man whose curiosity seemed to know no bounds. Leonardo was not merely a painter. He was an inventor, an engineer, an anatomist, and a scientist. His notebooks, written in his distinctive mirror script, contained designs for flying machines, military weapons, and architectural projects that were centuries ahead of their time. He dissected human bodies to understand how muscles and bones worked. He studied the flow of water, the flight of birds, and the movement of light. Everything fascinated him, and yet, for all his wide-ranging interests, Leonardo completed relatively few paintings. He was a perfectionist who often left works unfinished, moving on to new projects before completing old ones. The painting we know as the Mona Lisa was begun around 1503 or 1504, when Leonardo was living in Florence. He worked on it for several years, perhaps as many as 4, though some scholars believe he continued to refine it even longer. Unlike many Renaissance paintings, which were created quickly for specific patrons, the Mona Lisa seemed to have been a personal project, a work that Leonardo kept with him and returned to over time. When he left Italy for France in 1516, accepting the invitation of King Francis I, he brought the painting with him. He died in France in 1519, and the Mona Lisa remained there. Eventually it became part of the French royal collection and, after the Revolution, found its permanent home in the Louvre Museum in Paris. The painting itself is modest in size, measuring only about 30 inches by 21 inches. It depicts a woman seated in a chair, her body turned slightly to one side while her face looks directly at the viewer. Behind her stretches a mysterious landscape of winding paths, bridges, and distant mountains. The colors are muted, dominated by browns and greens, and the figure seems to emerge from shadow. There is nothing dramatic about the composition, and yet something about it captures the attention and refuses to let go. The traditional identification of the woman in the portrait comes from Giorgio Vasari, an Italian painter and writer who published a famous book called Lives of the Most Excellent Painters, Sculptors, and Architects in 1550. Vasari wrote that Leonardo had painted a portrait of Lisa, the wife of a wealthy Florentine merchant named Francesco del Giocondo. This is why the painting is sometimes called La Gioconda, a reference to the Giocondo family name. According to Vasari, Francesco commissioned the portrait to celebrate the birth of a son and the purchase of a new home. There is some documentary evidence to support this identification. A note written by a Florentine official in 1503 mentions that Leonardo was working on a portrait of Lisa del Giocondo. This contemporary reference gives the traditional theory considerable weight. Lisa Gherardini was a real person, born in 1479, who married Francesco del Giocondo in 1495. She lived a long life, dying in 1542 in a convent where she had spent her final years. If she is indeed the woman in the portrait, then we know more about her than about the subjects of most Renaissance paintings. And yet doubts persist. Some scholars have proposed alternative identities for the mysterious woman. One theory suggests she was Isabella of Aragon, a noblewoman of high status, whose features bear some resemblance to the portrait. Another theory proposes that the subject was a courtesan or mistress rather than a respectable merchant's wife. More provocative suggestions have identified the subject as Leonardo's mother, Caterina, painted from memory as an idealized figure. Perhaps strangest of all is the theory that the Mona Lisa is actually a feminized self-portrait. Leonardo himself, depicted as a woman. Why does the question of identity remain unresolved after 5 centuries? Part of the problem is that Leonardo left no definitive record of who he was painting or why. His notebooks, though extensive, do not clearly identify the subject of this particular work. Vasari's account, while influential, was written decades after the painting was created, and Vasari was known to embellish his stories. The documentary evidence, though suggestive, is not conclusive, and the painting itself offers no inscription, no coat of arms, nothing that would identify the sitter beyond doubt. Beyond the question of who she was lies an even deeper mystery: the meaning of her smile. The Mona Lisa's expression is unlike anything else in Renaissance portraiture. It is subtle, ambiguous, and strangely alive. Viewers have described it as serene, melancholy, mocking, and knowing, Some see warmth in it. Others see detachment. The smile seems to change depending on where you stand and how long you look. It is this quality, more than anything else, that has made the painting famous. Leonardo achieved this effect through a technique called sfumato, an Italian word meaning smoky or soft. Instead of painting hard lines between light and shadow, Leonardo blended them together in gradual transitions. The corners of the mouth and the edges of the eyes, the areas most important for reading facial expressions, are deliberately left unclear. The result is a face that seems to shift before our eyes, its expression never quite settling into a single readable emotion. Modern scientists have studied the smile using sophisticated technology. Researchers have analyzed how different parts of the image activate different regions of the brain. Some studies suggest that the smile appears more pronounced when viewed with peripheral vision and fades when looked at directly. Others have measured the precise curvature of the lips and compared it to models of emotional expression. The findings are interesting but inconclusive. The smile resists scientific explanation, just as it resists artistic imitation. In recent decades, researchers have also searched for hidden messages within the painting. Some have claimed to find tiny letters or numbers painted into the eyes of the figure. Others have used infrared and X-ray technology to examine layers beneath a visible surface, revealing earlier versions of the composition and changes Leonardo made as he worked. These investigations have shown that Leonardo experimented extensively, adjusting the position of the hands, altering the background, refining the expression over many years. But they have not revealed any secret code or hidden meaning. Perhaps the mystery of the Mona Lisa is its meaning. Leonardo created a portrait that transcends the individual sitter, whoever she was. The woman in the painting has become a symbol of beauty, of mystery, of the Renaissance itself. Her smile invites interpretation, but resists definition. She has looked at from a frame for 5 centuries, and she will continue to look out for centuries more. Still smiling, still silent, still keeping her secrets. While Leonardo was perfecting his masterpiece in Florence, across the continent in England, a far darker mystery was unfolding. It did not involve paint and canvas, but flesh and blood, 2 young boys of royal lineage who entered the Tower of London and were never seen again. The 15th century was a brutal time for the English monarchy. For 30 years, the country had been torn apart by a series of civil wars known as the Wars of the Roses. 2 branches of the royal family, the House of York, whose symbol was a white rose, and the House of Lancaster, represented by a red rose, fought bitterly for control of the throne. Kings were overthrown and restored, then overthrown again. Noblemen switched allegiances as fortunes changed. Battles claimed thousands of lives, and those who lost did not merely lose power. They often lost their heads as well. By 1461, the Yorkist faction had triumphed. Edward IV, a tall and charismatic warrior, seized the crown and held it for most of the next 2 decades. His reign was not without challenges. He was briefly deposed in 1470 before reclaiming power the following year. But by the early 1480s, his position seemed secure. He had produced heirs, including 2 sons who would continue the Yorkist line. The future appeared settled, but Edward IV was not a healthy man. Years of indulgent living had taken their toll. In April 1483, at the age of just 40, the king fell ill and died. The cause of his death remains uncertain. Some historians suggest pneumonia, others a stroke, still others poison, though no evidence supports that last theory. What is certain is that his death plunged England back into uncertainty. The new king was his eldest son, also named Edward, who was only 12 years old. A child king was always a dangerous proposition in medieval England. The boy could not rule on his own. Someone would have to govern in his name until he came of age. Edward IV had anticipated this situation and named his brother, Richard, Duke of Gloucester, as Lord Protector. Richard was a proven soldier and administrator, loyal to his brother throughout his reign. There seemed no reason to doubt that he would faithfully serve his nephew. The young Edward V was at Ludlow Castle in the Welsh Marshes when his father died. Richard intercepted him on the journey to London and took control of his household, arresting several members of the Queen's family who had been accompanying the boy. This was the first sign that the transition of power would not be smooth. Queen Elizabeth Woodville, the boy's mother, was alarmed. She took sanctuary in Westminster Abbey with a younger son, Richard, Duke of York, and her daughters. She clearly feared for her family's safety. Young Edward V was lodged in the Tower of London. To modern ears, this sounds ominous. We think of the Tower as a prison and a place of execution, but in the 15th century, it was also a royal residence. Kings traditionally stayed there before their coronations. There was nothing unusual about Edward V taking up residence in the Tower as he prepared to be crowned. The coronation was scheduled for late June 1483. In early June, Richard persuaded Queen Elizabeth to release her younger son from sanctuary. The boy, 9-year-old Richard, Duke of York, joined his brother in the Tower. The stated reason was that young Edward needed company, and that both boys should be present for the coronation. Elizabeth Woodville reluctantly agreed, apparently believing that her sons would be safe. The two princes were now together in the Tower of London, and they would never leave it. What happened next stunned England. On June 22, 1483, a clergyman named Ralph Shaw preached a sermon at St. Paul's Cross in London. His message was explosive. Edward IV's marriage to Elizabeth Woodville had been invalid. According to Shaw, Edward had been secretly betrothed to another woman before his marriage, making his union with Elizabeth illegitimate. If the marriage was invalid, then the children born of it were illegitimate as well. They could not inherit the throne. Within days, a group of lords and citizens presented a petition to Richard, Duke of Gloucester, asking him to take the crown himself. Richard accepted. On July 6, 1483, he was crowned King Richard III in a splendid ceremony at Westminster Abbey. His 12-year-old nephew, who had been king for just over 2 months, was now simply Edward, bastard son of the late king. He had no claim to the throne whatsoever. The two princes remained in the Tower, but they were seen less and less frequently. During the summer of 1483, witnesses occasionally spotted them playing in the Tower grounds or glimpsed them through windows. But as the weeks passed, these sightings became rarer. By autumn, the boys had vanished from public view entirely. Rumors began to spread through London and beyond. The princes, people whispered, were dead. The rumors reached foreign courts. In January 1484, the Chancellor of France publicly stated that Edward IV's sons had been murdered. In England, Richard III never produced the princes to disprove such claims. He never explained what had happened to them or where they were. His silence was deafening. If the boys were alive, showing them publicly would have quieted the dangerous rumors. If they were dead, their bodies were never found. At least not during Richard's lifetime. Richard III's reign lasted only 2 years. In August 1485, he was defeated and killed at the Battle of Bosworth Field by Henry Tudor, who became King Henry VII. The new king married Elizabeth of York, eldest sister of the missing princes, uniting the warring houses and ending the Wars of the Roses. Henry VII had every reason to investigate what had happened to his wife's brothers, yet he never produced a definitive account, never held anyone accountable, never solved the mystery. Nearly 2 centuries later, in 1674, workmen renovating the Tower of London made a startling discovery. Beneath a staircase, they found a wooden box containing the bones of 2 children. The bones were examined briefly and then, at the command of King Charles II, placed in an urn and interred in Westminster Abbey. A later examination in 1933 suggested that the bones belonged to 2 children whose ages were consistent with those of the princes. In 1483, but the examination was limited by the technology of the time, and its conclusions have been questioned. Modern scientists have requested permission to conduct DNA testing on the bones. Such testing could potentially determine whether the remains are related to known descendants of the York family. But the Abbey authorities have so far refused these requests, and the bones remain in their urn. Their identity unconfirmed. We still do not know for certain whether they are the princes, and if they are, we do not know who killed them or why. The mystery of the princes in the Tower has endured for over 5 centuries. It has inspired plays, novels, and endless historical debates. The faces of the 2 boys imagined by artists who never saw them stare out from paintings and book covers. Forever young, forever lost. Their fate remains one of the darkest and most compelling puzzles of the Renaissance era. A century after the princes vanished, another mysterious death would grip England. This time, the victim was not royalty but a playwright, a man of extraordinary talent, whose life was cut short in circumstances that still do not fully make sense. Christopher Marlowe was born in Canterbury in 1564, the same year as William Shakespeare. His father was a shoemaker, a respectable tradesman, but not a man of wealth or influence. Yet young Christopher possessed a fierce intelligence that would carry him far beyond his origins. He won a scholarship to the King's School in Canterbury and then to Corpus Christi College at Cambridge University. His education was meant to prepare him for a career in the church. Instead, it prepared him for something far more dangerous. At Cambridge, Marlowe distinguished himself as a brilliant student. He earned his Bachelor of Arts degree without difficulty. But when he sought his master's degree, the university hesitated. There were troubling gaps in his attendance records. Long periods when Marlowe had been absent from Cambridge without explanation. Rumors circulated that he had converted to Catholicism and traveled to the English seminary at Reims in France, where Catholic priests were trained to return secretly to Protestant England. In an era when religious conflict could mean imprisonment or death, such rumors were serious indeed. Then something unusual happened. The Privy Council, the highest governing body in England, serving directly under Queen Elizabeth I, intervened on Marlowe's behalf. A letter was sent to Cambridge stating that Marlowe had been engaged in matters touching the benefit of his country and that he should receive his degree. The university complied. Marlowe got his master's degree in 1587. Historians have long interpreted this intervention as evidence that Marlowe was working as a spy. England, in the 1580s, was engaged in a shadow war with Catholic powers, particularly Spain and the Pope. Queen Elizabeth's spyma, Sir Francis Walsingham, had built an extensive network of agents who infiltrated Catholic circles, gathered intelligence, and sometimes participated in elaborate deception operations. Marlowe, it seems, was one of these agents. His absences from Cambridge were likely spent on missions for the crown. His apparent interest in Catholicism was probably a cover, designed to gain the trust of those he was meant to betray. But Marlowe was not merely a spy. He was also becoming one of the most important writers in the English language. In 1587, the same year he received his degree, his play Tamburlaine, the Great burst onto the London stage. The play told the story of a Central Asian conqueror who rose from humble origins to rule an empire. Its language was thunderous, its ambitions vast, its effect on audiences electrifying, nothing quite like it had been seen before on the English stage. Marlowe had invented a new kind of drama, and he was just getting started. Over the next 6 years, Marlowe produced a remarkable body of work. The Jew of Malta was a dark tale of revenge and religious hypocrisy. Edward II explored the downfall of a weak king and his male favorite. And Dr. Faustus, perhaps his greatest play, told the story of a scholar who sells his soul to the devil in exchange for knowledge and power. These plays pushed boundaries of every kind. They questioned religious orthodoxy, examined the nature of power, and explored desires that respectable society preferred to leave unspoken. They were brilliant, dangerous, and hugely popular. Marlowe himself was as controversial as his work. He was known for his sharp tongue and his willingness to provoke. Accusations swirled around him constantly. He was said to be an atheist, a charge that could carry the death penalty in Elizabethan England. He was rumored to hold heretical views about Christ and the Bible. He was reported to have said that those who did not love tobacco and boys were fools. Whether these accusations were true, exaggerated, or entirely fabricated by enemies remains unclear. What is clear is that Marlowe lived on the edge, courting danger with the same recklessness that marked his art. In May 1593, the danger caught up with him. On May 12th, his fellow playwright Thomas Kidd was arrested and interrogated under torture. Among Kidd's papers, the authorities found documents containing heretical ideas. Kidd, desperate to save himself, claimed the papers belonged to Marlowe. A warrant was issued for Marlowe's arrest. On May 20th, he appeared before the Privy Council and was released on bail, ordered to report daily until the matter was resolved. The charges were serious. The punishment, if convicted, could be severe. 10 days later, Christopher Marlowe was dead. On the morning of May 30th, 1593, Marlowe traveled to a house in Deptford, a town on the Thames River just east of London. The house belonged to a widow named Eleanor Bull, who rented rooms and provided meals to respectable guests. Marlowe spent the day there in the company of 3 men, Ingram Freeser, Nicholas Skeers, and Robert Poley. They talked, they ate, They walked in the garden. In the evening, they returned to the house for supper. What happened next is described in the coroner's report, which was prepared after an inquest held 2 days later. According to this official account, a dispute arose over the bill. The reckoning, as the document calls it. Marlowe had been lying on a bed while the other 3 men sat at a table with their backs to him. Words were exchanged. Marlowe grabbed Fraser's dagger from his belt and struck him on the head, causing 2 wounds. Fraser, trapped between his companions and the table, struggled for the weapon. In the scuffle, the dagger was turned against Marlowe. It struck him above the right eye, penetrating 2 inches into his brain. He died instantly. The inquest jury ruled that Fraser had acted in so. Within a month, he received a formal pardon from the Queen. The matter was closed. Christopher Marlowe, dead at 29, was buried in an unmarked grave in the churchyard of St. Nicholas in Deptford. But was this really what happened? Almost immediately, questions arose, and they have never been satisfactorily answered. All 3 men present at Marlowe's death had connections to the world of espionage. Robert Poley was a professional spy, deeply involved in the Walsingham network. He had played a key role in uncovering the Babington plot, which led to the execution of Mary, Queen of Scots. Nicholas Skearce was a shadowy figure associated with various intelligence operations and financial swindles. Ingram Fraser was a servant and business agent of Thomas Walsingham, a cousin of the late spymaster and himself involved in intelligence matters. These were not random companions. They were men who knew secrets and kept them. The timing was also suspicious. Marlowe was facing serious charges of atheism and heresy. If he talked, if he revealed what he knew about the intelligence operations he had participated in, powerful people could be embarrassed or worse. Silencing him permanently would have been convenient for many parties. Was the fight over the bill a cover story? Was Marlowe lured to Deptford specifically to be killed? Some theories go even further, suggesting that Marlowe did not die that day at all. According to this view, the death was staged to allow Marlowe to escape England and avoid prosecution. Proponents of this theory have even suggested that Marlowe continued writing under another name, William Shakespeare. This theory is not taken seriously by most scholars, who point to substantial evidence that Shakespeare was a real person with a documented life quite separate from Marlowe's. But the theory persists, a testament to the enduring fascination that surrounds Marlowe's death. The truth of what happened in that room in Deptford may never be known. The witnesses had every reason to lie. The official account may be accurate, or it may be a carefully constructed fiction. All we know for certain is that one of the greatest writers of the English Renaissance died violently at the age of 20, under circumstances that remain deeply suspicious more than 4 centuries later, while Marlowe's death silenced one of the Renaissance's most brilliant voices. In a library somewhere in Europe, a very different kind of mystery was waiting to be discovered. It was not a mystery of murder or politics, but a mystery of knowledge itself. A book that has baffled every scholar who has tried to read it. In 1912, a rare book dealer named Wilfred Voynich was examining a collection of old manuscripts at a Jesuit college in Italy. The Villa Mondragon, located in the hills near Rome, held many treasures accumulated over centuries. But one item caught Voynich's attention, unlike any other. It was a small book, bound in vellum, filled with handwritten text and elaborate illustrations. The text was written in an alphabet that Voynich had never seen before. The illustrations depicted plants that did not exist, astronomical diagrams that defied understanding, and strange scenes of human figures immersed in networks of pipes and pools. Voynich knew immediately that he had found something extraordinary. The book became known as the Voynich Manuscript, and it has puzzled scholars ever since. Voynich himself spent years trying to decipher it, convinced that he had discovered a lost work of medieval science. He believed the text might contain secrets of alchemy, herbal medicine, or astronomical knowledge long forgotten. He showed it to experts around the world. None could read it. When Voynich died in 1930, the manuscript passed to his widow, and eventually it was donated to Yale University, where it remains today in the Beinecke Rare Book and Manuscript Library. The manuscript consists of approximately 240 pages, though some pages appear to be missing. It is written on vellum-treated animal skin that was commonly used for important documents before the widespread adoption of paper. Carbon dating conducted in 2009 determined that the vellum was produced sometime between 1404 and 1438. This places the manuscript's creation firmly in the early Renaissance. During a period of intense intellectual activity and experimentation, the text itself is the heart of the mystery. It is written in a flowing, elegant script that suggests a confident hand. The letters, if they are letters, form words and sentences that follow consistent patterns. There are spaces between word-like units. Some symbols appear more frequently than others. Certain combinations recur throughout the text. All of this suggests that the writing represents a genuine language or cipher, not random marks made to deceive. And yet, despite more than a century of effort, no one has been able to determine what that language is, or what the text says. Professional cryptographers have attempted to crack the code. During World War II, some of the same codebreakers who worked on enemy ciphers tried their skills on the Voynich Manuscript. They failed. In the decades since, computer analysis has been applied to the text, searching for statistical patterns that might reveal its structure. These studies have confirmed that the text has linguistic properties, its word-length distribution, for example, resembles that of natural languages, but they have not identified which language it might be, or what system of encoding was used. Some researchers believe the text represents a natural language written in a unique alphabet. Candidates have included Latin, Italian, Hebrew, Arabic, and even an early form of Ukrainian. Others suggest it might be a constructed language, an artificial system invented by the author for private purposes. Still others argue that the text is meaningless, a sophisticated hoax designed to impress or deceive. Each theory has its supporters, and each has significant weaknesses. The illustrations are as puzzling as the text. The largest section of the manuscript is devoted to botanical drawings, detailed images of plants with roots, stems, leaves, and flowers. At first glance, they resembled the herbal manuscripts that were common in medieval Europe, books that documented medicinal plants and their uses. But the plants in the Voynich manuscript do not match any known species. Some appear to be composites, combining features of multiple plants into impossible hybrids. Others are entirely fantastical, with shapes and structures found nowhere in nature. If these drawings were meant to represent real plants, the artist either had a very different understanding of botany or was deliberately creating fiction. Another section contains astronomical or astrological diagrams. Circular charts showed what appeared to be zodiac symbols surrounded by concentric rings of text and imagery. Some diagrams depict celestial bodies, suns, moons, and stars arranged in patterns that have no obvious correspondence to the actual sky. Other pages show what might be cosmological models, attempts to map the structure of the heavens or the earth. But without the ability to read the accompanying text, the precise meaning of these diagrams remains unclear. Perhaps the strangest section depicts groups of nude women immersed in pools or connected by networks of tubes and pipes. The women are drawn simply, almost childishly, but the scenes they inhabit are bizarre. Some appear to be bathing in green or blue liquid. Others seem to float through complex systems of channels. Various theories have been proposed to explain these images, that they represent medical or alchemical processes, fertility rituals, or symbolic journeys of the soul. None of these theories has gained widespread acceptance. Who created this remarkable book, and why? The manuscript's early history is almost entirely unknown. The first documented owner was Georg Berisch, an alchemist living in Prague in the early 17th century. Berisch was as puzzled by the manuscript as later scholars would be. He wrote to the Jesuit scholar Athanasius Kircher, hoping that Kircher might succeed in deciphering it. Kircher was famous throughout Europe for his studies of ancient languages, including Egyptian hieroglyphics, but there is no evidence that Kircher ever solved the mystery. After Berisch's death, the manuscript passed through various hands before ending up at the Villa Mondragon, where Voynich eventually found it. A letter accompanying the manuscript suggested an even earlier provenance. According to this letter, the book had once belonged to Emperor Rudolf II of the Holy Roman Empire. Rudolf, who reigned from 1576 to 1612, was famous for his interest in alchemy, astrology, and the occult. He collected curiosities from across the world and employed numerous scholars to investigate the mysteries of nature. If Rudolf owned the Voynich manuscript, he might have paid handsomely for it. The letter mentions a sum of 600 ducats, a significant fortune, but this account is second-hand and cannot be verified. Various candidates have been proposed as the manuscript's author. Roger Bacon, a 13th century English friar and philosopher, was an early favorite. Bacon wrote about secret knowledge and experimented with codes and ciphers, but the carbon dating of the manuscript rules him out. The vellum was produced more than a century after Bacon's death. Other candidates include John Dee, the Elizabethan mathematician and occultist, and Edward Kelly, his scryer and sometime collaborator. Both men had connections to Prague and to Emperor Rudolph's court, but there is no direct evidence linking either man to the manuscript. Some scholars have concluded that the manuscript is an elaborate hoax. According to this theory, someone created a fake book filled with meaningless texts and illustrations, hoping to sell it to a wealthy collector like Rudolph II. The apparent linguistic properties of the text might be an artifact of a simple algorithm designed to produce realistic-looking nonsense. The strange plants and diagrams might be invented precisely because they could not be checked against reality. If the hoax theory is correct, the manuscript is a masterpiece of deception, a book designed to be unsolvable because there is nothing to solve. Yet the hoax theory has weaknesses as well. Creating 240 pages of consistent fake text would require considerable effort and skill. The text shows no obvious errors or corrections, suggesting either extreme care or genuine fluency. And if the goal was simply to deceive a buyer, why make the book so elaborate? A shorter work might have been equally convincing and far easier to produce. The mystery of the Voynich Manuscript endures because none of the proposed solutions is fully satisfying. The text continues to resist decipherment. The illustrations continue to defy identification. The author, the purpose, and the meaning of the book remain unknown. It sits in its climate-controlled vault at Yale, waiting for the scholar or computer program that will finally unlock its secrets. If secrets, there are two unlock. Each of these four mysteries, the portrait, the princes, the playwright, the manuscript, has generated centuries of theories. Scholars have debated the evidence, proposed solutions, and challenged each other's conclusions. And yet, despite all this effort, none of these mysteries has been definitively solved. What do the experts believe? And why do they continue to disagree? The study of historical mysteries is not merely about finding the right answer. It is about weighing evidence, considering possibilities, and acknowledging what we cannot know. For each of the four mysteries we have explored, scholars have developed multiple theories. Some have gained wide acceptance. Others remain controversial, and for all of them, definitive proof remains elusive. Understanding these debates helps us appreciate both what historians have accomplished and what limits they face. The past does not give up its secrets easily, but the effort to uncover them reveals much about how we think, we reason, and how we grapple with uncertainty. The identity of the Mona Lisa has been debated for centuries, and art historians remain divided. The traditional identification, Lisa Gherardini, wife of the Florentine merchant Francesco del Giocondo, has the strongest documentary support. The 1503 note by the Florentine official, Agostino Vespucci, specifically mentions that Leonardo was working on a portrait of Lisa del Giocondo. This contemporary reference is powerful evidence, and most mainstream scholars accept it as settling the question. Yet alternative theories persist. Some researchers have pointed to similarities between the Mona Lisa and portraits of Isabella of Aragon, Duchess of Milan. Isabella was a noblewoman of high status who had connections to the Sforza court, where Leonardo worked for many years. Proponents of this theory argue that the quality and care Leonardo invested in the paintings suggest a more important patron than a merchant's wife. The self-portrait theory, though it sounds outlandish, has attracted serious attention. Digital analysis has shown certain structural similarities between the Mona Lisa's face and Leonardo's own features, as depicted in his later self. Some scholars suggest that Leonardo deliberately created an idealized, feminized version of himself, an artistic experiment rather than a commissioned portrait. Others dismiss this theory as fanciful, noting that superficial facial similarities prove nothing and that the documentary evidence points clearly to Lisa Gherardini. A more nuanced view suggests that the Mona Lisa may have begun as a portrait of a specific woman but evolved into something more universal. Leonardo kept the painting for years, refining it continuously. Perhaps it ceased to be a portrait of any individual and became instead an exploration of beauty, expression, and the limits of representation. This interpretation does not resolve the question of identity, but it may explain why the question seems so difficult to answer. The mystery of the princes in the tower has generated even fiercer debate, largely because the stakes are so high. If the princes were murdered, someone must bear responsibility. And for more than 5 centuries, historians have argued about who that someone was. Richard III is the traditional suspect. He had the clearest motive with the princes alive. His claim to the throne remained vulnerable. He had the opportunity. The boys were in the tower, under his control, and contemporary sources accused him of the crime. The Tudor historians who wrote after Richard's defeat at Bosworth Field portrayed him as a monster, a hunchbacked villain who murdered his way to power. Shakespeare immortalized this image in his play Richard III, creating one of literature's great villains. But Richard has his defenders. Members of the Richard III Society and other revisionist historians argue that the case against him is circumstantial. No direct evidence proves he ordered the princes killed. The Tudor accounts were written by the victors, who had every reason to blacken Richard's name. Some scholars suggest that the princes were still alive when Richard died in 1485, which would point the finger at his successor, Henry VII. Henry Tudor certainly had motive. As long as the princes lived, they represented a threat to his own claim to the throne. Some historians have suggested that Henry, not Richard, was responsible for their deaths, or at least for ensuring they never reappeared. The fact that Henry never produced evidence of what happened to the princes, despite marrying their sister, has struck some scholars as suspicious. A third suspect sometimes mentioned is Henry Stafford, Duke of Buckingham. Buckingham was Richard III's close ally in 1483, deeply involved in the events that brought Richard to power. He later rebelled against Richard and was executed. Some historians have speculated that Buckingham might have killed the princes on his own initiative, either to curry favor with Richard or to advance his own ambitions to the throne. But evidence for Buckingham's guilt is even thinner than for the other suspects. The bones discovered in 1674 remain central to the mystery. If DNA testing could establish that they belonged to the princes, it would confirm that the boys died and were buried in the tower. It might even provide clues about when they died, which would help narrow down the list of suspects. But the authorities at Westminster Abbey have repeatedly refused requests for testing, citing concerns about disturbing royal remains. Until this changes, the bones will keep their secrets. The death of Christopher Marlowe presents a different kind of puzzle. Not a question of who, but a question of why. The identity of his killer is known. Ingram Fraser admitted to the deed and was pardoned for it. The question is whether the official account of what happened is true. The self-defense theory, as recorded in the coroner's report, has some plausibility. Tavern fights were common in Elizabethan England. Men carried daggers as a matter of course. A dispute over money could easily turn violent, and a struggle for a weapon could result in an accidental death. Some historians accept this explanation, arguing that there is no need to invoke conspiracy when ordinary human conflict provides a sufficient cause. But the conspiracy theory has powerful advocates. The presence of 3 men with intelligence connections at the scene of Marlowe's death is difficult to dismiss as coincidence. Robert Poley, Nicholas Skeers, and Ingram Fraser were not ordinary gentlemen. They were players in a dangerous world of espionage and deception. The timing of Marlowe's death, just days after he had been accused of atheism and summoned before the Privy Council, suggests that someone may have wanted to silence him before he could talk. Who might have ordered such a killing? Theories abound. Some scholars point to the Cecil family, who controlled much of Elizabeth's government and would have wanted to protect the intelligence network from exposure. Others suggest that Marlowe had become a liability to his former masters in the spy service, a man who knew too much and talked too freely. Still others propose personal motives, suggesting that Marlowe had made enemies who seized the opportunity to eliminate him. The faked death theory, while popular in some circles, has little scholarly support. The idea that Marlowe escaped to the continent and continued writing under the name of William Shakespeare is romantic, but unsupported by evidence. Shakespeare's life is well documented, his handwriting is known, and his career can be traced through contemporary records. The theory requires believing in an elaborate conspiracy that has left no trace, an extraordinary claim requiring extraordinary evidence that does not exist. The Voynich Manuscript presents perhaps the most frustrating puzzle of all, because the fundamental nature of the mystery remains unclear. Is the text a genuine language waiting to be deciphered? A code that conceals real information? Or an elaborate fake with no meaning at all? The genuine language theory holds that the manuscript was written by someone with knowledge to share. Perhaps medical, botanical, or cosmological. The text's statistical properties suggest a real linguistic structure. If this theory is correct, the manuscript might eventually yield to analysis, either through the discovery of a key or through advances in computational linguistics. Some researchers have claimed breakthroughs, identifying the language as a form of Hebrew, Latin, or even a Proto-Romance language, but none of these claims has been widely accepted. The hoax theory has gained ground in recent years. Scholars have shown that the text's properties could be reproduced using relatively simple methods available in the 15th century. A table of syllables or word parts, combined according to certain rules, could generate text that looks linguistic without meaning anything. The strange illustrations, which match nothing in reality, might have been invented precisely to resist verification. If the manuscript was created to deceive a wealthy buyer, perhaps Emperor Rudolph II, the hoax was remarkably successful. But the hoax theory has weaknesses. Creating 240 pages of consistent nonsense would be extremely tedious. The manuscript shows no obvious errors, corrections, or signs of mechanical generation, and the level of effort involved seems out of proportion to any likely reward. Some scholars argue that a real body of knowledge, however strange, remains the most economical explanation for the manuscript's existence. What unites these four mysteries is not just their age or their fame. It is the nature of the evidence that surrounds them. In each case, we have fragments. A document here, a testimony there. Physical remains. That may or may not be what they appear to be. We have theories that fit some facts, but not others. We have gaps that cannot be filled because the relevant information was never recorded, or was deliberately destroyed, or simply did not survive the passage of centuries. The Renaissance was an era when powerful people had reasons to hide the truth. Kings concealed their crimes. Spy masters protected their agents. Scholars encoded their dangerous ideas. Much of what we do not know about this period was never meant to be known. The mysteries that remain are not accidents of history. They are, in part, the products of deliberate choices by people who preferred that certain things remain hidden. And yet, we keep searching. New technologies offer new possibilities. New documents occasionally surface. New perspectives reveal patterns that earlier scholars missed. The mysteries of the Renaissance may never be fully solved, but they will never be fully abandoned either. Something in the human spirit refuses to accept that the past is close to us. There is something in the human spirit that cannot leave a mystery alone. We are drawn to unanswered questions. The way moths are drawn to light, we circle around them, returning again and again, hoping that this time we will find the answer that has eluded everyone who came before. This impulse is not limited to scholars or detectives. It lives in all of us. It is part of what makes us human. The four mysteries we have explored are centuries old. Generations of researchers have studied them. Libraries have been filled with books about them, and yet they remain unsolved. This persistence is remarkable. In a world where so much has been explained, where we understand the motion of planets, the structure of atoms, the code of life itself, these Renaissance puzzles continue to resist our efforts. They remind us that knowledge has limits. Not everything can be known. Some doors remain closed, no matter how hard we knock. And yet, we keep knocking. Why? Part of the answer lies in the nature of mystery itself. A solved puzzle is satisfying, but it is also finished. Once we know the answer, our attention moves elsewhere. An unsolved mystery, by contrast, remains alive. It invites us back. It offers the possibility, however slim, that we might be the ones to finally crack it. Every unsolved mystery is a challenge and a promise. It says, the truth is still out there, waiting to be found. But there is more to our fascination than the hope of solving puzzles. These mysteries also connect us to the past in ways that settled facts cannot. When we wonder about the identity of the Mona Lisa, we are sharing a question that has been asked for 500 years. When we debate the fate of the princes, we are joining a conversation that began in the court of Richard III. When we puzzle over Marlowe's death or the Voynich manuscripts, meaning we are part of a community that stretches across centuries, a community of the curious, united by questions that none of us have been able to answer. This connection matters. The past can sometimes feel distant and dead, a collection of dates and names with no relevance to our lives. But mysteries make the past feel present. They remind us that the people who lived centuries ago were as complex, as secretive, as capable of deception and genius as we are today. The woman in Leonardo's portrait was a real person with a real life, even if we do not know who she was. The princes in the tower were children, frightened and confused, caught up in events beyond their control. Marlowe was a young man full of talent and ambition, whose life was cut short in a room in debt. The author of the Voynich Manuscript, whoever that person was, spent countless hours filling pages with words and images that still baffle us today. When we engage with these mysteries, we are not merely solving puzzles. We are acknowledging the reality of these lives. We are saying that they mattered, that their stories deserve to be remembered, that the truth of what happened to them is worth pursuing. This is an act of respect. It is also an act of connection. Across the gulf of centuries, we reach out to people we will never meet, trying to understand their world and their fate. Each of these mysteries also reveals something about the era that produced it. The Mona Lisa speaks to the Renaissance fascination with beauty, with the human face, with the subtle play of light and shadow. Leonardo was not merely painting a portrait. He was exploring the limits of what art could express. The ambiguity of the smile is not an accident. It is the point. Leonardo wanted to create an image that would resist easy interpretation, that would continue to surprise and engage viewers for as long as the painting survived. In this, he succeeded beyond anything he could have imagined. The princes in the tower revealed the brutal realities of Renaissance politics. The Wars of the Roses were not distant abstractions. They were struggles for survival in which the losers often paid with their lives. Royal children were not protected by their youth or innocence. They were pieces on a chessboard to be used, imprisoned, or eliminated as strategy required. The mystery of the princes endures, in part because it forces us to confront this darkness. We want to know what happened to them because we want to believe that someone should be held accountable for their fate. Marlowe's death opens a window onto the dangerous intersection of art, politics, and espionage in Elizabethan England. The theater was not merely entertainment. It was a space where ideas could be tested, where boundaries could be pushed, where dangerous thoughts could find expression. Playwrights like Marlowe lived on the edge, courting controversy and attracting the attention of powerful enemies. The fact that he was also a spy adds another layer of danger. Marlowe moved through a world where information was currency, and where those who knew too much might find themselves silenced. His death, whatever its true cause, reminds us of the price that can be paid for living a life on the edge. The Voynich Manuscript speaks to the Renaissance pursuit of hidden knowledge. This was an era when scholars believed that ancient wisdom had been lost and might be recovered. Alchemy, astrology, and the study of secret languages were taken seriously by educated people. The manuscript, with its unknown alphabet and its strange illustrations, fits perfectly into this context. Whether it contains genuine knowledge, constructed gibberish, or something else entirely, it reflects a world in which the boundaries between science and magic, between knowledge and mystery, were far less clear than they are today. Beyond what these mysteries reveal about their own era, they also tell us something about ourselves. Our fascination with the Mona Lisa reflects our endless interest in human expression and the secrets it may conceal. Our obsession with the princes reflects our hunger for justice, our belief that wrongs should be exposed and punished, even centuries after the fact. Our speculation about Marlowe reflects our awareness of how fragile genius can be, how easily a brilliant life can be cut short. Our attempts to decode the Voynich Manuscript reflect our confidence, perhaps our overconfidence, that every problem has a solution, if only we are clever enough to find it. There is also a humbling dimension to these mysteries. We live in an age of extraordinary knowledge. We have mapped the human genome, photographed distant galaxies, and connected billions of people through digital networks. We are accustomed to finding answers quickly, but these Renaissance mysteries remind us that some questions resist even our most sophisticated tools. They teach us humility. They invite us to sit with uncertainty, to acknowledge what we do not know, and to find value in the search itself, regardless of whether it leads to a final answer. Perhaps this is the deepest lesson these mysteries offer. Not every question can be answered. Not every puzzle can be solved, and that is not a failure. It is simply a truth about the world. The past is partly knowable and partly not. Some secrets were kept too well. Some evidence was lost forever. Some questions will echo through time without ever finding a final resolution, and yet we continue to ask them. We continue to search. We continue to wonder. Because that is who we are. We are creatures who need to understand, who cannot rest with uncertainty, who keep reaching for the truth, even when it slips through our fingers. The mysteries of the Renaissance are not just puzzles to be solved. They are mirrors in which we see ourselves, our curiosity, our persistence, our hope that meaning can be found even in the darkest corners of the past. We have traveled far in our journey through the Renaissance. We have stood before a painted woman whose smile has puzzled millions. We have walked the cold corridors of the Tower of London, where two young princes disappeared into silence. We have entered a room in Deptford where a brilliant playwright met his sudden end. And we have turned the pages of a manuscript that no one can read, filled with words and images that guard their secrets still. These four mysteries are separated by geography, by circumstance, and sometimes by decades. Leonardo worked in his Florentine studio. The princes vanished in London. Marlowe died on the banks of the Thames. The Voynich Manuscript emerged from somewhere in Central Europe. Each story stands alone, complete in its own strange details, and yet, taken together, they form a portrait of an era, an age of brilliance and shadow, of creation and destruction, of knowledge pursued and secrets kept. The Renaissance gave us so much. It gave us art that still moves us to tears. It gave us literature that still speaks to our deepest experiences. It gave us science that laid the foundations for the modern world. It gave us a vision of human potential that continues to inspire. But it also gave us questions. Questions that remain unanswered, despite centuries of effort. Perhaps this is fitting. An era of such richness and complexity deserves mysteries to match. The Renaissance was not a simple time, and it is not left as simple stories. What strikes us most about these mysteries is not their darkness, though darkness there certainly is. It is their persistence. 500 years have passed since Leonardo began painting the Mona Lisa. 500 years since the princess entered the tower. More than 400 years since Marlowe was killed. 600 years since someone created the Voynich Manuscript. Empires have risen and fallen in that time. Technologies have transformed human life beyond recognition. The world in which these mysteries were born has vanished almost entirely, and yet the mysteries themselves remain, as fresh and puzzling as they were when they first emerged. This persistence tells us something important. It tells us that the past is not simply past. It does not stay behind us, safely contained in history books and museum displays. It reaches forward into the present, tapping us on the shoulder, asking us questions we cannot answer. Every generation inherits these mysteries from the generations before. Every generation adds its own theories, its own investigations, its own frustrated attempts at resolution, and every generation passes the mysteries on, still unsolved, to those who come after. Perhaps this is how it should be. Perhaps some questions are meant to accompany us through time, not as problems to be solved, but as companions on our journey. The Mona Lisa does not need us to identify her. She will keep smiling whether we discover her name or not. The princes do not need us to find their murderer. Their fate, whatever it was sealed long ago. Marlowe does not need us to explain his death. He has been dead for centuries, beyond the reach of justice or vindication. The Voynich Manuscript does not need us to read it. It has waited this long. It can wait longer. And yet, we continue to care. We continue to search. We continue to wonder. Because these are not merely academic puzzles. They are human stories. Behind every mystery is a life, or lives that were actually lived. The woman in the portrait sat for Leonardo, felt the light on her face, held her pose while the master worked. The princes played in the tower gardens, not knowing what was coming. Marlowe laughed and argued and wrote his magnificent plays, not knowing that he had only weeks to live. Someone sat down with pen and ink and vellum and created the Voynich Manuscript, page after page, for reasons we will never understand. When we engage with these mysteries, we are honoring those lives. We are refusing to let them disappear entirely into the silence of history. We are saying, you mattered. Your story matters. We do not know the truth of what happened to you, but we have not forgotten you. We are still asking. The Renaissance has much to teach us about art and science, about power and politics, about human creativity and human cruelty. But perhaps its greatest lesson is this, that wonder is precious, and that not all questions need answers to have value. The mysteries we have explored tonight are gifts from the past. They invite us to pause, to reflect, to imagine, and to accept that some things remain beyond our grasp. The whispers continue across 5 centuries. They reach us still, faint, mysterious, and strangely beautiful. We cannot always understand what they are saying, but we can listen. We can wonder, and we can carry these stories forward, as generations before us have done, into a future where perhaps, whose perhaps, the answers will finally be found. Or perhaps they will not. And perhaps that, too, is part of the gift. Thank you for walking with us through these shadows of the Renaissance. Together, we have explored 4 mysteries that have puzzled scholars, inspired artists, and captivated curious minds for centuries. The Mona Lisa's smile, the vanished princess, the playwright's death, the manuscript no one can read, each one a thread connecting us to a world long gone, yet somehow still speaking to us across the ages. Now we would love to hear from you. Which of these mysteries fascinates you most? Do you have a theory about the Mona Lisa's identity, or who is responsible for the prince's fate? Perhaps you have thoughts about what really happened in that room in Deptford, or what secrets the Voynich Manuscript might contain. Share your ideas in the comments below. History belongs to all of us, and every perspective adds something valuable to the conversation. If these stories stirred your curiosity, consider sharing them with a friend who loves history and unsolved puzzles. And if you would like to explore more hidden corners of the past, we hope you will return. The past is full of whispers. All we need to do is listen.